Okay. If anybody has any particular subject they want to be discussed in the future, let me know. I was thinking of speaking today about the laws of telling a guy to do something for you on Shabbos. That was That was one of the things that I learned recently, and it was actually one of the things in the shul that we were speaking about for the summer. I mean, whatever. It's a common question, for example, people have that the light was left on in the refrigerator. What to do? Or they want to know the light is off in the house. What could they do? So, Amid al-Nachri is a very complicated subject. There's many details, and there's many different opinions. And the Alter Rebbe has his opinion, and the Alter Rebbe changed his mind even from the Shulchan Aruch, and later there's a Madura Basa, a later edition. The Alter Rebbe changed the whole way of looking at going doing malacha for you.
Oh, wow. What?
The Alter Rebbe later changed as a Madura Basa, in the Kunter Sachin, at the end of the second volume of Shulchan Aruch. You have a second later edition. Alter Rebbe later, he changed his psak in the way it's in the actual Shulchan Aruch.
So what do we go by? Obviously,
we go by the Madura Basa. Madura Basa more or less has a much more lenient approach, even though in a few details it's more strict.
Is there a difference between a shul and a private house?
According to some, not according to the Alter Rebbe.
Okay.
Now, there's a few basic things that we'll speak about like this. There's certain things you can't tell a guy to do. Certain things that only you can't tell a guy to do, even if he did it for you, you're not allowed to have benefit from it. There's one thing you're not allowed to tell a guy, please do this for me. But what happens if the guy did it for you without you asking him? So then there's certain things, even if the guy did it without you asking him, you can't have benefit from it. And not only that, you have to stop the guy from doing it for you. If he's coming on his own to do it for you, you have to tell him, I'm sorry, please don't do this for me. Then there's certain things that you're allowed to outright tell the guy to do. So there's certain things that are permissible in certain circumstances to tell a guy to do, certain things that are not permissible to tell a guy, but you could tell it to him in an indirect way. Then there's certain things that you can't even tell him in an indirect way, and even if he does do it, you can't have benefit from it. So I'll start from the things that are the most severe. Things that are most severe, things that are hanos haguf, physical benefits. If a guy puts on a light for you, you have direct physical benefit from the light. If the guy warms up food for you, you're having direct physical benefit. So things that are hanos haguf, direct physical benefit, the Alter Rebbe holds that those are the worst type of things. Since a Jew has physical benefit, so the guy is considered like he's acting for the Jew. I mean, you can't look at it another way. Even if the guy will get paid for it, get some type of benefit for it. But since the act in of itself is an act which is done for the benefit of the Jew, so then it's the guy, there's no other way of dissecting it, rather the guy is doing it for the Jew. So the things that are nos haguf, which is turning on the lights, preparing food, things like that are the most severe. Now what happens if your lights are off? So, according to this, it wouldn't help anything. But there are a few ways. First of all, if you have small kids at home. So the halach is that it's tzarchei tinnik, tzarchei cotton, that for small kids, you have very young kids, anything that they need, you're allowed to tell a guy to do for them. So if they need food,
you can tell a guy to.
Yeah, a small child has a din of a choy l'shem b'sakana. A person that is not a sick man, that is not, his life is not in danger, but he needs to be taken care of pretty well. I just want to be makdim before I go into any of these details that I'm not saying halacha l'maisa now. There's so many details, there's so many shittas. I'm just giving basic guidelines, so more or less what where the score is holding. So for kids, for small kids, at least very small kids, whatever they actually need. I mean, if you only need one light on, you can't have them put on all the lights. What they need, you can have a guy do directly. Now, Another heter would be, which is, you have to know how to play around with this. If there's already light in the room, in other words, let's say in your dining room, you need to eat, and the light is off, but you have light, some light coming in, let's say from the kitchen, or you have, the candles are burning at the table. So there's some general light, basic light that you would need to be able to eat. You have enough light to eat b'shas adchak, it's just not very comfortable. So in such a case, a goy would be able to turn on extra light for you, but you can't ask the goy directly. You would have to do it in a hint that he should understand to do it on his own. And there's a few precautions here, which I'll get to it in a minute, but just to focus a little bit. If there's enough light to do whatever you need to be done, and you're able to do that b'shas adchak, you have candles burning on the table, you're usually able to eat to that light. Or if you have light coming in from another room, you're able to do what you basically need to do. You call in a goy. Now over here, this is the most trickiest part. In Hilchos Hamidul Nachri, not so much inside the halachic aspect, but inside the practical way how to speak to a goy. And there's many different opinions here. And again, I'm not saying halacha l'maisa. Every Rav will tell you, what his psak. In such a case, there's a few points here. First of all, you can't tell the goy directly what to do. Not only you can't tell the goy what to do, you can't even hint to him what to do directly. In other words, you can't let's say motion with your fingers, that you need the light on. What you could do is you could tell him something from which he understands what you want him to do. So let's say you could tell him, I can't eat when the light is off. I can't eat when the light is off, or something like that. In such a case, he should understand on his own to put on the light. Now, if he tells you, so what do you want me to do? It happens. You have to be very careful what you say. You could just repeat what he said. I can't eat when the light is off. Or
could you show him where it is?
That's already very questionable, because when you're showing him what it is, where it is, it's kamat like a direct hint at what to do. So you could tell him, I can't tell you what to do. Do as you think. Whatever. I don't even know.
If you tell him that?
I don't know if you can tell him do as you think. It's very hard. It's very great. The best thing is to tell him, listen, I can't tell you what to do. Or,
You can say it's outside of him, we're not allowed to turn it on.
That's also questionable, according to some. According to some, it's also questionable. It's a very gray area over here. If you just tell him, I can't eat when the light is off, and he decides, and if I state what you want, and he puts it on, so, so then you did what, fine. If he didn't understand what you want and he starts asking you, you have to be very careful to just stick to your original story. I can't eat when the light is off. It's going to be very uncomfortable, until he finally gets what you want him to do. Once you start telling him, I would appreciate this, or do what you think is right, or I can't do this, becomes very questionable here. That's one thing.
Could you tell him, make up with a guy, he lives in your building? You make up with the guy beforehand and said, just in case the lights go off on Shabbos.
You could tell it to him
before Shabbos.
But you see, there, a guy before Shabbos, you can't tell him that, even before Shabbos, you can't tell him directly do something for you on Shabbos. Well, you can, even if the problem is not only telling a guy on Shabbos do something, but having a guy doing something for you on Shabbos is also. Even if you tell it to him before Shabbos. I'll say more details here because it's important to understand how great the area is here. Calling him into your house, right? How are you going to get the guy? So, you're going to call him into the house. What are you going to tell him when you're going to call him in?
He's not just going to come.
He's not just going to come.
Yeah.
So either you tell him, just listen, you meet him on the street, tell him, I can't, my lights are off, and I can't eat when the lights are off, and expect you to understand. But let's say someone
Are you allowed to say something to the degree that on Shabbos we can't, on Saturday we can't turn on the lights?
One second, I'll get to that in a minute.
And then
the simple thing would be to tell him.
Invite him in for food.
Oh, you could invite him in to eat. The question is,
random
guy in the street, why is he going to come for food? If you invite him in for food, fine. Invite him in, for whatever reason, if he doesn't know what it's fun. Now, most people say, oh, I need help. Could you come and help me for a minute? Becomes a machloek. The modern day poskim have an argument about this, whether it works. Because telling him I need help is like clearly asking him, please do something for me. So some people say yes, some people say no. The best thing would be to try to get him into your house. Either you could tell him, listen, my lights are off and I can't eat in the dark, whatever it is. Now, what about telling him, just tell him straight up, let's say a guy comes in, you say, listen, the lights are off, I'm not allowed to turn it on. It would appear, it doesn't say so clearly, and again, it's not speak to a local up, it would appear there are some people that say that would be prohibited. Why? The prohibition that it's whatever the exact explanation is, but it boils down to, I'm not allowed to tell it, even though I'm not telling the guy what to do. There's another prohibition of speaking about an act that I'm not allowed to do on Shabbos. I'm not allowed to speak about, let's say, there's a prohibition called V'dar b'davar. I'm not, things you're not allowed to say on Shabbos. Let's say I'm going to drive tomorrow. So you're not allowed to speak about a malacha on Shabbos. Right. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to speak about a malacha on Shabbos. If you tell the guy, oh, I can't do this, and you're specifying the act itself, the malacha, it could be a question of a daber davar. It could be a question of the prohibition of speaking about something that I'm not allowed to do. So, I don't want to get into the whole pilpul over here, but even though the guy would be able to do it on his own, but you can't, according to some, and that's also, because you look in the poskim, the way they write it is, the Lord, let's say the Alter Rebbe brings a case where somebody's delivering a letter for you. So you can't tell him to open it up, but you could tell him, I can't read it as long as it's not opened. Again, it depends, not in every case could you read mail anyway on Shabbos. There's a number of details here. Some people say that this only applies in the olden days, in the delivery in the olden days, not in today's mail. But at any rate, Alter Rebbe says, I could tell him I can't read it as long as it's not open. Why can't I just tell the guy I can't open it? Yeah. The Alter Rebbe writes it in this roundabout way. I'm not even telling him what I want him to do. I'm just telling him I can't read it as long as it's not opened, and I'm relying on the guy to understand what I want. The Alter Rebbe also uses another lashon over here. He says, I'm telling him something that he should understand to do, from this to understand to do a malacha on Shabbos. But it seems from the wording of the poskim that they specifically don't give examples of telling him, we're not allowed to do this on the Sabbath. Or, I can't eat if somebody doesn't turn on the lights. You could say I can't eat as long as the light is off. But mentioning the actual act you want him to do would seem to be prohibited, not necessarily because I'm telling the goy to do something, because I'm not directly telling him to do anything, but because speaking about the act itself could be prohibited under another prohibition of a daber davar, speaking about activities that I'm not allowed to do on Shabbos.
Now what about, this happens on a weekly basis, well not necessarily a weekly basis, but very, very frequent on Shabbos. My wife would order something online, whatever, it'll come on Shabbos. Now we open up they ring the bell, we go down, they open it, they know we can't sign for anything, UPS, whatever, they'll just, we won't bring it into our house, but either they'll carry it in or they'll leave it downstairs by the mail slot. Is there any, if you know that it might come on Shabbos, you should, in a sense, do you have to refrain from doing it?
No.
Or it doesn't make a difference?
Unless the only problem would be if you make an expedited delivery. Or if you tell them, let's say it's 2-day shipping and you pick that the 2-day shipping in a way that it has to come on Shabbos. If you schedule it that it has to come on Shabbos, that would be your problem. Or that not only that, even if you schedule it, they have to handle it on Shabbos. In other words, it's going to take 2 days to 3 days to come. It will come on Monday, but in order for it to come on Monday, they would have to ship it on Shabbos. So that would be another thing, because in such a case of a UPS or mail, it has a whole different getter. That's what we call a kabbalah, a contractor. They're doing something for payment. Technically, in such a case, they're allowed to do it for you because they're not doing it. They're not considered your shliach, not considered your agent. They're doing it, you're paying them per the job.
Same thing with the mail.
Same thing with the mail.
So why?
1 second, yeah. But if you tell them they're bedavka to do it on Shabbos, let's say you mail a letter with somebody and you tell him I need it to be there by Sunday, and he has to go on Shabbos to do that, so that would be prohibited.
If you didn't, my wife gets this 2-day shipping, stuff like that. So if she orders on Thursday, it's going to come on Shabbos. But that's because she's not doing anything special for that in a sense. That's what she has. She has 2-day shipping, and anything from Amazon comes 2 days. But that's there. It's not. I don't.
You're not picking, in other words, the 2-day shipping.
No,
it's
happening automatically. She has it in the account.
I don't know. I don't know. Speak to. I'm not. You're asking me a direct question. I'm not gonna.
Okay.
I'm not gonna pass it not at all. But I don't know.
So we were saying about the.
I could see whatever.
It can be both ways.
From one hand, it's as if you're telling them to do it on Shabbos. The other hand, it's not like that they, like you have a choice. Like they, from their side, it's not like whatever. I don't know. At any rate, now, so getting back to when you call the guy into the house, so you can't tell him directly, can't hint to him directly. You could tell him something from which you understand what you want, mentioning the actual act that you want him to do. Or let's say saying, I can't open up the lights, or it's decided that we can't do this. There is room, again, there's a certain mashmos, implication, that itself would be a problem. There's another additional point here, which the Alter Rebbe emphasizes. Mishnah Berurah and others don't bring this down. The Alter Rebbe holds that, which is a very important thing to keep in mind, that it's only permissible if the guy is doing it for his benefit. You're calling in the goy, let's say, right? And why is the goy going to put on the light? Whatever he's going to do.
Because of what you're
Because he's doing you a favor, right? So even if you didn't tell him directly, but he's doing you a favor, so he's like your shliach. So it has to be set up in a way that the goy is doing it for himself. So how would that be? So if it's, let's say, some type of goy, they have some type of relationship of returning favors, You do him a favor sometimes, he does you a favor, let's say a neighbor, whatever it is. So then, in such a case, when you're calling in the goy, so why is he doing it? He's doing it because he's expecting a favor in the future, or to pay you back for a favor that you did. You're going to call in a regular goy off the street that he doesn't know you from Adam, so he's definitely doing it for you. So what's the other eight? The other eight is to give him something. Before he does the thing, the malacha. Because most times, even if you're gonna give it to him later, so at the time he did the malacha, he did it for you, not for the thing he's getting. He wasn't even thinking he's going to get something. And B, a lot of times he won't take it. He says, no, I'm fine, So you have to give it to him before, practically, so you should know he's doing it, in his mind he's doing it as a return for a favor. So, now giving it to him is also, there's, certain halachas in that. Halachically, you can't give a goy something, you're allowed to call a goy and give him food. But let's say, if you're going to give it to him in his hand, and he's going to walk out with it right away, so you did the akira, you picked it off, and he just finished the act of carrying it outside. So you have to either give it to him when he's standing, before he moves, or just put it down on the table. Another thing is he has to be able to eat it in your house. Or give him an amount of food he could eat in your house. If you're giving him something which he's going to have to take outside, so it looks like you told him to take it outside. So, even in such a...
Oh, that's so weird. Because that's basically...
If you're giving him something and you're giving him too much food that he won't be able to eat at once, or even if let's say you're giving him also an object, whatever it is, something which nobody would think that he might have brought it on his own. You give him a bottle of beer, no one's going to be choishish necessarily that he took it from you. It could be he walked into your apartment with a bottle of beer. But if you're going to give him something that is going to be clear that you gave it to him, or Right, or if you're gonna give him a lot of food that he doesn't have the option to eat it all in your house, so then it's as if you're giving it to him to carry outside, which is a problem. So if you tell him, listen, take a can of soda, a bottle of beer, whatever. The best thing is, again, don't give it to Goy directly in his hand. I mean, even if in such a case you're giving it to him before he does anything, it wouldn't be a problem anyway, because he's not going to walk out right away with it. But in Indian, it's just keep in mind, these things. You tell him, you call him in and say, here, take a bottle of beer, take this, take a drink, a face, and afterwards you tell him indirectly what you need. So now, getting back to the case that the lights were off. So if you need it for kids, you don't have to go through this whole thing. You don't have to tell him indirectly, you don't have to give him something. But if you don't need it for very young kids, you probably should want to eat Suda Shabbos comfortably. So if you could have a heter that if there's lights burning, let's say you have light in the house, you have light coming in from the kitchen, you just need more light. So you'll call him in, you'll give him something, so it should be considered he's doing it for himself. And tell him directly, tell him, listen, we can't enjoy our meal if the lights are off, whatever it is. And hope that he chapsich on his own, what does he matter of him. Such a case would be okay, because you are able, anyway, b'shasat chak, to eat the food. So the goy is not, even though I said earlier that the goy turning on the light for you is like the worst type of han, is the worst thing is doing it for you, but here, the goy anyway, if worst came to worst, you would have been able to eat. So now, there's a few points here. What happens when the candles go out? Could you still use the light that the goy lit? The goy put on the lights, and the heter was because it was candles that you had Shabbos candles there, that you had light coming in from the hallway, from the kitchen, I don't know what. But if let's say, if the light is coming from the hallway, the kitchen is probably on the whole Shabbos. If let's say just the light from the Shabbos that were there. Once that light goes out, so at this point you wouldn't have been allowed to ask the goy to put on the light for you. Because you wouldn't have had the heter that you anyway would have been able to eat at the light of the candles. So once the candles go out, could you still use the electric light? It's a question. So there's a machlokes really at this thing. The Rebbe said that in case of a great need, in other words, that it's negeya to oinik Shabbos, like you need to continue your meal or whatever it is, it's going to, bog down your whole Shabbos, so then you could use the light, even after the candles go out. But it's important to know that, all these things, there's a lot of fine print. Right. Now another thing is, let's say the candles were just light enough they're able to eat. We weren't able to read anything. And the guy puts on the light, now you're able to do everything. So again, Poskim right, you're not allowed to read now, because the reading is a benefit that you wouldn't have had without the guy. So you're not allowed to have any benefit, anything they were able to do b'shas atchak, even if the guy wouldn't have put on the light, plus we would have been able to read, but it would have been, it would have been too much light, so you're able to continue reading even though the guy put on the light. Because you're able anyway to read, b'shas atchak, to the light of the candles. But if you wouldn't have been able to read, so then you could only have the benefit from what you would have anyway been able to have. Let's say eat, and put your dishes down, whatever it is. So these are, the worst, again, the thing of lighting candles, putting on the light, which is, one of the most chomertic things regarding to, there is a way, if you have Shabbos candles, whatever, there's a way working around. I mean, another thing is if it's bein hashmoshes, I've mentioned this before over here.
You can do it directly.
If it's bein hashmoshes, you can do it directly. How long bein hashmoshes is shaky, but 15 minutes you definitely for sure have. 15 minutes after Shkia. 15 you have whenever, you have 15 minutes for sure. So in such a case, you could call in the goy.
I was actually once by a shliach.
1 second, if you need it for Shabbos. In other words, it's time to put on the light, but if you need the light where you're going to eat, whatever it is, if it's a Seder Shabbos, Mam, you can ask the goy ben hashmoshes, no questions. Yeah. So that is regarding turning on the lights, which is the common thing that happens. Let's say there's another point here. Another point here is that it depends what type of bulb it is. If it's a fluorescent, it's a whole other discussion. See, that's why it's so complicated. If it's a fluorescent bulb, so the question is, it's not a deiraisa, it's not a melacha deiraisa to put it on. A fluorescent bulb, what is the problem with a regular bulb? A regular bulb has a wire that becomes red hot.
Right.
If you take like a metal, make it red hot, that's a melacha. Fluorescent or other bulbs that work by gas is not they don't have I don't know. I think they say that there are still at the edges.
Coils.
There are coils that become red hot.
I don't know if they come red hot, but they have to.
So if you have coils that become red hot, you might have the same problem. But if you have some type of bad bulb that works just on, there's nothing that becomes red hot. I don't know if there's such a thing. You have to. I don't know these things. But if you go into nitty gritty of it, so if you would have such a bulb, it wouldn't be a deraisa to put on. It would only be a derabanan.
So you can tell a goy.
Now, a derabanan is a whole separate thing. A derabanan, you could tell a goy to do a derabanan in certain cases. Let's say b'mokim mitzvah, you need to be able to eat the Shabbos meal, you could tell it him. If the light would be some type of bulb that's doesn't have any quills that become red hot, it would only be a derabanan. A derabanan, you're allowed to tell a goy b'mokim mitzvah in the case of great need, whatever it is, if mamish needed for whatever reason. So these are the different things over here. Now, regarding the case of the refrigerator is like this. The refrigerator, there's a few details here. You're allowed to have a guy open up the refrigerator for you in such a case. Why? Because what are you telling the guy to do? You're asking the guy to open up the refrigerator. You're not asking the guy to put on the light. The putting on of the light happens automatically. So there's a concept that if you're telling a guy to do something, but automatically something else happens as a result, you're allowed to tell the guy to do Act A, although Act B is automatic thing, because you told the guy to do this. That's a permissible act. Something else evolves. You never told the guy to do that.
Now what's going to happen when you close it?
1 second.
Oh, sorry.
So opening up the refrigerator, having to open up the refrigerator door is not a problem. Now the problem is closing it, and the real problem is what are you going to do? You're going to have to open up. What are you going to do in the future? So now, closing the door is shayna shtikal a svara. Some people say that closing the door is also. I'm not to tell them to close the door because I'm just telling them to close it, not to close the light.
But if you just leave it, most of the refrigerators close by themselves.
Okay, fine. Other people say if I tell him directly to close the door, so he knows when he's going to close the door, the light will go off because he already opened. So it's not so simple. Other people say that it's not a problem. But in most cases, anyway, people want the light to be off in order they should be able to open it up later. Now, in such a case, you're going to have to rely on is another concept, which is going back to this concept. You could tell a goy to do a malacha d'rabbanan for you, shvus to shvus it's called. Telling a goy to do something is only asa d'rabbanan, is a d'rabbanan. To tell him to do another is if you're telling him to do an act, which that act is only asa d'rabbanan to begin with. So it's two d'rabbanans. A, telling the goy. B, the goy is only doing something which even for a Jew would be asa d'rabbanan. So it's a shvus to shvus, which will be allowed b'makom mitzvah, which means if your main Shabbos food is in that fridge, and it's not like it just is extra kugels and salads.
What about Baal Tashkis? You keep the refrigerator open.
So that would,
If you keep the refrigerator open, it's all going to go to waste.
So Hefsid Gadol. So in such a case, it's a great most. You're also allowed to tell the guy to close it. But
close the light, you would say.
1 second.
Oh.
Close the fridge. 1 second. Let me. Closing the fridge directly without telling him to close the light is much more lenient. So according to some people, it's the same way he's allowed to open it because he's not having in mind. You're not telling him to open it up with the light. So closing it is the same thing. But others say, listen, he already saw the light is open, and he knows that automatically when he closes, he's going to close the light. So, it's very hard to say that. Listen, to me, I personally don't understand so much that way of looking at it. But when Shmir Shabbos Chassid, he has this suffix over there. But telling him to close it will be much more simple than telling him to close the light. Telling him to close the light is directly telling him to close the light. Now, the idea is like this. Telling him to close the light would be permissible in the case where the main food for Shabbos is in the fridge. The main food for Shabbos means your fish, your meat, things that are essential part of the Shabbos meals. If it's just extra salads or kugels or things like that are just, they're not the main necessities of a Shabbos meal, it would be different. That wouldn't be necessarily considered, again, if you have small children invited, nicht to say poshet here because you could always get another guy later. It's not like that something's requiring you right now to close the light. But anyway, if it's the main Shabbos food, which in most cases in your refrigerator you have your fish, you have the main Shabbos meat. In such a case, you could tell the guy to close the light. The other option is, which is very hard to do, is to keep the fridge a bit open and put shmatas, and keep the light on, but from practice it usually doesn't.
And it closes.
That's also true, but if it would close, fine. At least you tried. It wasn't a situation, didn't have. But the other problem is that the food on the top shelf is going to get hot. I'm telling you from experience.
From life.
And not only that, if most shelves is glass. So I remember once we had, I think it was Taka Kfiyas like this year, that it was Shmini Atzeret Simcha, it's 3 days. And just one of the beginning of the light went off. The tape that I put wasn't strong enough when it opened up. So whatever, we put some stuff near the air conditioning, but we tried this whole thing, but the heat was mamish baking down. So I took a carton, a cardboard thing, and I had to put it on the top shelf so the light from the fridge shouldn't bake down on the rest of the fridge.
What about an air conditioning? We had it over here on
So air conditioning is only the Rabbanon. Because putting on an electric thing, there's no real light inside. It's LED, whatever they call it.
Yes.
The light is there. So putting on the thing, electricity is only the Rabbanon, according to the way we now. Telling you guys also only the Rabbanon.
So this was
Now, if it's very hot, it's very hot, very uncomfortable.
So we can have a kid in here, and we're good to the holidays.
So if you have a kid, that he needs it, yeah.
It happened the first day Yom Tov.
Questions, yeah, but or if you have people that are sick, people that are
Mrs. The older lady over here, she was like,
if somebody that's sick, there's no question.
Yeah.
But even if not, if people are very uncomfortable, it's like the same thing with the windows that I mentioned. The Rebbe's only problem was that you're telling the guy to do it the Raisa. But if you tell the guy to do it the Rabbanon, like taking out the windows wouldn't be Yosem Al-Teirah because you're not putting better windows in. So then Al-Teirah would be fine because they're mitzvah, they're very uncomfortable. Now again, people say it has to be that you're very uncomfortable. You sound because even Mokim Tsar, there's Gedorim. If it's really uncomfortable, it's a real hot day and you're sitting in shul, it's really uncomfortable, so you could even tell a guy directly to do it.